Hello, everybody. Jim here for another one of these, I guess, conversational type videos. I don't have it's not like a series or anything. I don't really have a name for these, but yes, conversational video. That works just fine. Sitting at home tonight, enjoying some nice cold beers and perusing some of the questions I've gotten on Facebook and that I sometimes get in the comments section on the videos here on YouTube. And tonight I'm going to be answering kind of a collective of them because a lot of them sort of run together. They more or less pertain to what's different about gaming in Japan, whether it be current gen gaming or retro gaming. What are some of the differences between gaming here versus gaming in the West, either North America or Europe? So I figured I could share my 2 cents on that subject, and we're going to be doing it all in one take tonight because I really don't feel like doing a lot of editing right now. Maybe it's the beer, but yeah, just not something I'm in the mood for. So one take. So if I screw up, please do forgive me. I do have some talking points here in front of me, and we're gonna go over those first. Gotta make it clear that I'm not exactly like the authority on the subject. I'm not an expert. I've been living here for about 6 years, so I don't think that's enough to make me any kind of authority on the subject of gaming in Japan. But again, I'm gonna share my 2 cents. So for what it's worth, yeah, this is subjective. This is my experience only. But first and foremost, I think this applies to both current gen and retro gaming. Different types of games are more popular in Japan, I would say, than other parts of the world. One obvious one, I think, is the RPGs or JRPGs, which even though in the past 10, 15, 20 years, however long it's been, RPGs or JRPGs at least have become more popular in the West. They're still obviously, I don't think, ever gonna do as well as they do in Japan, and that applies to current gen and retro games. And that's something that I notice a big difference in. A lot of RPGs in the West, it seems like, especially when you go back to like 8 and 16-bit especially, it seems like they cost a lot. Just for example, a lot of these Super Nintendo RPGs like Chrono Trigger is a really good example, Final Fantasy 3 and Earthbound, also another really good example of that. Some really expensive games, especially if you want complete copies of them. I'm assuming that's a supply and demand kind of thing, that maybe they didn't sell that well when they first came out because RPGs still weren't exactly booming in the West, in the US, at least. That's where I have my experience. I've lived in Europe, but I don't know jack shit about retro gaming in Europe, so any of my viewers who are European want to correct me there, that's fine. But here it's like you can go to a Hard Off, for example, and find complete boxed near mint copies of games like Chrono Trigger and the various Final Fantasy games and Legend of Mana, all these games, and you can pick them up for between, I want to say, $5 and $10 versus the hundreds I think you'd be expected to pay in the US. So that's a difference, at least in the retro gaming scene. I've noticed here that RPGs are very abundant and extremely affordable, but really my favorite types of games, which are like beat 'em ups and shooters and platformers, those tend to be more expensive when you go into the retro game scene. So it's kind of like a reversal, like the stuff that's sold like hotcakes in the States and is easily found, these days, it's swapped. That stuff is more expensive, I guess, less easy to come by here, or not less easy to come by. It's just for whatever reason the either the demand is higher, the supply is low. But the RPGs, extremely affordable and also all the various like graphic novel, dating sim type games. I think that's an almost like exclusively Japanese thing. I know that there are some that get released, stateside, and I think even when I was a teenager, there weren't console releases, but there were like DVD adventure games that were being released that were essentially like graphic novel games, and you used your DVD remote to make dialogue choices. So those were around, but in my experience, they've never been very popular at all in the West. In Japan, though, there's a ton of them. When I go to, like for example, a Vita section or PlayStation 4, PS3, any console really, there's always like a huge section of graphic novels and dating sim games, all this stuff that I don't know the first thing about, so it's an entire section that I tend to avoid. When I was trying to get a complete, Japanese Dreamcast collection, I had ended up picking up a lot of those dating sims, and eventually, like, I realized, why the hell do I have these? I do not like this kind of game at all. So I ended up selling pretty much all of them while I was living in Texas. That was, I want to say 2.5 years ago. But yeah, so there's one significant difference, is the kinds of games that are popular, the kinds of games that are expensive or rare versus the West. It's doesn't meet up exactly. Here, RPGs and visual novels, dating sims, all that stuff, incredibly cheap and easy to come by. Other things like beat 'em ups and shooters, those can get a little bit more pricey. That's one kind of difference, at least, especially when you're into retro game collecting. Another big difference is the proliferation of handheld gaming. I've talked about this before. Tokyo, a huge city, something like between 20 and 30 million people altogether in the metropolitan area, and it's a city that it's really made for public transportation. In my experience, a lot of these cities in the US, I don't want to say all, but definitely a lot, I would say the majority of cities and towns in the US are really made for driving. Public transportation isn't exactly the best, but Tokyo is kind of the opposite. You can still obviously drive around Tokyo, even though I prefer not to. I've been here 6 years, and for the past 2 years I haven't even had a car because I haven't really needed it, because the public transportation is so good. So a lot of people, myself included, spend a lot of time on the trains, either commuting to or from work or school or wherever they have to go. So it's not uncommon for someone to get on a train and they're going to be there one way for 30 minutes to an hour. So that gives you a lot of time to fill with handheld gaming. So not just handheld, but also phone gaming. Phone gaming, very prolific in Japan, or at least in Tokyo. I see a lot of it. Anytime I'm on the train, I would say at least 2/3 of the people on the train are either playing on a handheld like Vita, 3DS. I've even seen a couple of Switches out on the train recently, so people are utilizing the mobile features of the Switch, or they're playing on their phone. So a large, I would say the majority of people I usually see on the train are playing some kind of mobile game or handheld game. And I think that just has a lot to do with the fact that people are always commuting from one place to the other. Public transportation is so widely used, and you really do need to fill that time. And even when you are out in the city, it seems like a lot of people fill their time by kind of lounging around, maybe going to like a McDonald's or a Starbucks or somewhere else. It's like they fill these blocks of time with just sort of just like hanging out, and again playing on whatever mobile game it is that they play on. So that's a difference I've also noticed here, is that people spend a lot more time with handheld gaming and phone gaming. Again, just because I think they spend so much time away from home for work and school, other various activities. Another big difference, and this is the last one I'll mention for right now because it's the only one I wrote down. Arcade gaming, still pretty damn popular here, and I think that also again kind of ties in with the whole people are away from home a lot kind of aspect of living in Tokyo. There are lots of game centers. Pretty much any part of the city you go to, any individual town or neighborhood, there's gonna be at least one arcade there. And anytime I go into an arcade, it's usually pretty full. It seems like it's not only just something to do to kill time. It seems like it's also, for some people, kind of a social occasion. For instance, there are some games that I see. There's one in particular, I think it's called Gunslinger Stratus, where it's a game that's played with guns, kind of like light guns, but you don't just... It's like it's your controller, and it's also how you do attacks, but it's almost like kind of some sort of like an arena combat game or something like that. Every time I see people playing that, I never see like one person standing there playing it by themselves. It's always like 2 or 3 different people playing together and enjoying the game with friends. So it seems like the arcade here isn't just a time waster, it's also kind of a good way to socialize and hang out with friends. And a lot of the games in most arcades, because you can go to some that have like retro games and a lot of fighting games and shoot 'em ups and stuff like that, but a lot of what I see in just like your average everyday arcade, lots and lots of rhythm games. For one, there are so many different kinds of rhythm games. I lose track of them. Some of them are drumming and guitar and kind of classic stuff like that, DDR type stuff. But then there are other ones where it's like you're playing on like a piano or a synthesizer board, and then another one where it's a circular screen and you're hitting the screen, and another one's a giant cube and you're hitting all these blocks all over the cube. So there's just really a whole lot of different kinds of rhythm games, and that's something that maybe like is more prevalent here than anywhere in the world. Anytime I walk into an arcade, there's always a section that's nothing but rhythm games, and the players are always extremely good at them, like freakish levels. Like, I don't understand how they are picking up on like all of the little lights and bips and boops and hitting the right things at the right times, because it seems absolutely mind-boggling. So people obviously spend a lot of time with these games, because I see like a lot of just like master level players, and there's no uniform like kind of person that's good at those games, it appears to me. Like, I've seen really attractive young women, like teenage women and women in their 20s. I've seen young men, and I've seen like older men like in their 30s and 40s still in their business suits, in there absolutely killing on these rhythm games. So it seems like it's something that appeals to a really wide swath of gamers. And so rhythm games in the arcades, absolutely out of control. And also, oddly enough, like strategy games in arcades are also pretty prevalent. Again, every time I go to an arcade, there are arcade cabinets set up, but they're like little tables with monitors, and they'll come with mouse or mice and stylus pens, and they're like cards that you use to play the games as well. And usually, like the Gunslinger Stratus game, when I see them being played, it's usually a grouping of people sitting around playing them, and they're all playing matches together, because the cabinets, they're not only interlinked within the arcade, they're actually most of them I think are online. So even, for example, if you want to go and play like Initial D or the most recent Dragon Ball Z fighting game, they're all online, so you can actually play against players in other arcades around the country. So again, the arcade kind of filling in as sort of like a social environment, because I guess Again, if you're going by my scenario where you're a person who lives an hour or more outside of the city, you get on the train, you commute an hour into the city, and then you've got time to fill before you leave home again, that arcade is like a great place to go to either pal around with coworkers or your fellow students. And short of that, short of that, you can get online in the arcade and play against some other players around the country as well. So arcades much more prevalent and easy to find in Japan than anywhere else in the world I've ever been to. The variety of games you'll find in these arcades and the variety of players is again more diverse than I've seen in any other arcades in any other place I've ever been in the world, and that includes North America and Europe. And the fact that it acts as sort of like a social interactive, area. Excuse me, I gotta take a swig of this. If I don't have enough beer, my throat gets dry. But yeah, it serves for very much the social gathering, which I think is cool. Anyway, I think I've been babbling on enough. But in general, yeah, those are some of the differences I've noticed about gaming in Japan, whether it be current gen or retro versus gaming in North America. Just different types of games that are popular and easier to come by. The prices are kind of all over the place, kind of swapped versus prices you're expected to pay in the West for different kinds of games that were popular there but weren't so popular here, and vice versa. It's kind of a whole different beast. The handheld gaming, which is much more prevalent here because of the amount of time people spend away from home, and hand in hand with that, the arcade gaming, which is still really popular, which I appreciate a lot, because there's almost nothing I like more in this life than walking into a crowded, noisy arcade and sitting down to enjoy some arcade games. Anyway, yeah, I've prattled on a lot, so if you sat through this whole thing, listened to all of it, I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble. And again, I'm not an authority on this subject. These are just some of my observations. Anyway, if you have any questions at all for me, you can feel free to put them down in the comments section, or I always provide links to my Facebook and my Twitter down in the description. If you want to go and have a talk with me there, ask your questions on Facebook and Twitter, you're more than welcome to do that as well. You're encouraged to do that, actually, because I do like hearing from people on the Facebook and Twitter. That's pretty cool. Anyway, everybody, thank you for sitting through this. Thank you for listening. Take care. I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.